When I was younger, I used to have this rule that to be a spiritual master, you had to be so electric that if I came into your presence, my hair would stand on end, and I would suddenly be overcome with utter omniscience, and I could see 360 around the entire room and look into people's hearts beating to a fly's thoughts. Those are my rules. And sure enough, I met enough spiritual people, masters, gurus, who I found to be human beings, regular people, who might have attained mastery in a certain technique, or had a lot of really great things to say, but they didn't give me that. And guess what? My conclusion was, there are no spiritual people. My conclusion was, nobody is a guru. This was all fake. It was all phony. It was all a lie. As opposed to changing my rules and my standards for what it meant to be spiritual, to what it meant to be enlightened, I just assumed that there was no such thing. Now, what's fascinating to me is that while at the very same time I was writing philosophical articles trying to criticize Dawkins' approach to altruism, because what I said was that, well, what he's doing is he's not eliminating what it means to be altruistic through his definition of selfishness. He's rather redefining it. And I really did believe this. I thought that if you have a dichotomy like altruism and selfishness, right? Two antipodes, two opposites. That if you eliminate one, for example, you explain one using the other, saying like, oh, all altruistic acts are really selfish acts to promote one's own genes, then what you're really doing is you're really redefining what it means to be altruistic. Because the point is, in our language, we have this difference. We have this dichotomy. It's sustained. So I'm not going to get any more into the philosophy here. The point is just to say that we often have two choices when we receive new information. One, we can just take it in, and if it eliminates one of our categories, one of our dichotomies, one of our antipodes, we have unbalanced information now. We just have it all on one side. The other choice is we can adjust. We can change our rules. We can change our standards. So how does this all relate? Well, what I was talking about was, well, here are all these spiritual people who weren't meeting my rules and my standards for what it meant to be a spiritual person. And I was getting disappointed because I was thinking to myself, look, here I am, this spiritual aspirant who wants to have this spiritual experience, but then, look, all these people are phonies. And you know what? The whole time I didn't even consider that maybe what the issue was not the people who I was in contact with, but my own rules. And this can be so big. Oftentimes, it's not what happens that makes a difference, but it's our rules and our standards about it. So, for example, I use this example a lot. Somebody gives you a rose, and their rule is that is the most wonderful, sweet gift that they could ever give to someone. One red rose, a symbol of their love. But guess what? Maybe one of your rules is that anyone who gives you a rose or a flower is just trying to sleep with you. They're just being corny. They don't really know what romance is. They don't really know how to be genuine or sweet or original. Right? So you can take this really sweet offer and make it sour. And you might be listening thinking to yourself, Yeah, right, I don't do that. But there might be another point in your life where you do that. For example, what are your rules for friendship? Maybe your rules for friendship is that your friend is never late. Not once. Not one time could they ever even be a minute late to grace your presence or for you to grace their presence. Either way, right? But guess what? You might have a friend who has a rule, time doesn't really matter. And I appreciate people who do take their time. Right? Again, these are rules. These are rules that we have. Hold on one second. I'm back. So the point that I'm trying to make right now is that we really need to be clear about what our rules and our regulations and our standards are. Because I'll tell you one thing, that if we're not, they'll end up leading us in all types of crazy directions while we try to blame other things, while we are thrown for a complete loop. For example, we blame the other person and we attack them as opposed to realizing, well, maybe there's something wrong with how we're defining things. So this is really, really an important point, and one that I hope that you get, and one that I'm going to repeat very often. I encourage you right now, examine what are your rules for love? What are your rules for family? What are your rules for friendship? What are your rules for happiness and for love? Because maybe one of your rules for love is that your partner kisses you on the lips every single time they see you. Well, guess what? If you don't communicate that with your partner, if you don't know that for yourself, you might get pretty unhappy when they don't kiss you on the lips when they greet you. And that might not be because they don't love you. Maybe their version of love is to take their time and to respect the other person's space until they're held in that person's arms and kissed themselves. So you see how our rules can overlap and they can basically be in tension and in conflict with one another. That's why it's so important to know what our rules are, and furthermore, to know what other people's rules are. If you really want to understand another person, give them what they want, in order to give yourself what you want, a peaceful, loving, happy, amicable relationship. Find out their rules. What are their rules for business, for pleasure, for happiness, for friendship? Find those rules, and you'll unlock their hearts. So much love.